Hi, my name is Keenan Pucci. I'm part of the graduating game design BFA class, and I have a love for all types of game design, but specialize in VR and AR development. Currently, I'm a creative technologist doing just that at the startup Paralux. And for my capstone, I present Mentally in Action, developed by myself with sound design by Landon Rudd. MIA is a VR narrative experience where the player embodies a Vietnam War veteran in the present day who is still haunted by their past. Interaction and reaction to the world expands the story, especially when the player experiences recurring PTSD flashbacks. The narrative reveals the depths of horror and trauma that armed conflict creates, and sheds a light on the past and present treatment of a surviving veteran. The mechanics mimic real-world actions to remain accessible to a player with any level of VR experience, but the mature content and themes make this at least a PG-13 game. A casual player who enjoys narrative games and has tried VR is the target audience here. In the beginning, this was inspired by The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, which I read in high school, and sophomore year I just had an idea for a PTSD war game. In the visual communications, this mood board was created in the class with Will Hall. This mood board was meant to represent a game about a veteran fighting through surreal, nightmarish PTSD flashbacks. But then as I actually got started with the capstone process, researching war games in the games industry as they exist now, there's things like Call of Duty and Far Cry, basically violent, commando, rampaging fantasies. And then when I began researching mental illness representation in games, there's everything from Borderlands Psychos to Senua and Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. While Senua is closer to what I wanted to represent, still not quite right and removed from the present day. As I began researching the Vietnam War and PTSD for more specific reference, I struggled with understanding the specifics of PTSD. It varies greatly from person to person and is difficult to fully grasp even in its broader definitions. Through this gap in my own knowledge, even after research and researching current connections between VR and PTSD, I hypothesized VR not only has applications as PTSD treatment through VR exposure therapy, but can more broadly educate the public through simulations. I found the solution to my knowledge gap from interviews with a Vietnam veteran Larry and a late veteran's widow Gloria. I learned all about their specific experiences, detailed accounts of PTSD, what flashbacks look and feel like, and other long-term effects that war has had on their lives. Veterans have faced immense struggles with post-war life, and especially Vietnam War veterans. 680,000 Vietnam War veterans were denied disability, resulting in many of their deaths from exposure to Agent Orange, which the VA refused as a basis for disability until recently. This is where the game seed really took shape as a faithful representation of the life of a veteran, in order to benefit veterans by informing players. Now we get into development. Some challenges. This was a one-person team for the most part, with some AAA ambitions with the realism I wanted to depict, so a lot of things were sourced online, models and animations from online asset markets. They really saved so much time in indie dev. I started with a fully audio prototype, and people got very confused, but the audio still worked when that was all that was there. So Landon Rudd, my sound designer, adds so much realism and believability to the world and makes such a difference. Once we got to the visual prototype, it started feeling real, and people were getting it more, but it felt stereotypical and with these generic props. So adding real photos that grounded this in someone's real life, one of the people I interviewed, gave this a lot more context, and it felt more real. And then lastly, once this was all done, I gave barely any context to playtesters besides how to hold the controller and what buttons to press to interact with the objects. And they had visceral reactions. They would freak out when experiencing a flashback, which really proved that this was getting across what I wanted it to. One thing I got out of this is I used to believe that you tell your own story and your own truth. But this isn't my story. It's a story I hope my players will learn just as much from as I did from my sources, and this is where it ended up. MAA uses VR to accomplish something few other mediums can: experience parts of another person's mind. Every part of the game, especially how the player experiences PTSD flashbacks, is based on the real stories of veterans, primarily sourced from interviews, with context filled in by documentaries and historical literature. The player experiences triggers, which bring on flashback glimpses or a full flashback, and the longer the player survives in the flashback, the more of the narrative they see. Players take away a newfound understanding of a veteran's life experience, all the humanizing similarities and shocking differences to their own life. They want to talk about the reality MIA is based off of immediately after playing it, and that interest leads to at least true sympathy, if not activism. My takeaway is VR is so powerful for getting visceral reactions out of players, and was able to truly create the feeling of some of the shock of a PTSD flashback. Regarding the future of MIA, this game does need a full studio to tackle it in its entirety, but the slice proved its potential to me and my playtesters. Thank you so much to my advisors, Winnie, Mitsu, and Sebastian, as well as the entire game design faculty and all the other students I shared this capstone process with. You all are phenomenal. This was made with a bunch of different sources listed there, and thank you so much for listening.